This flowchart outlines the mandate given to NASA's newly formed Space Task Group in 1958. The first two steps were explicit: put a crewed spacecraft into Earth orbit and measure how well a human could perform physical and mental tasks while up there. But the entire mission hinged on this third objective. If the pilot and the capsule were not safely recovered from the ocean, the flight was a failure. Designing the capsule meant engineering a mobile microenvironment, a pressurized shell capable of insulating a human body from absolute zero, unfiltered solar radiation, and the total vacuum of space. Project Mercury shifted the focus from rocket engineering to biological limits, serving as the ultimate test of whether human life could adapt to an environment that guarantees death. To find subjects capable of enduring that environment, NASA recruited exclusively from the ranks of active-duty military test pilots. An initial pool of 110 candidates was filtered through weeks of brutal medical and psychological screening at the Lovelace Clinic and the Wright Aero Medical Laboratory. Doctors subjected them to treadmills, ice water plunges, and isolation chambers until only 7 men remained. These final candidates were then strapped into centrifuges that simulated the crushing G-forces of launch and the deceleration of atmospheric re-entry, pushing their heart rates and respiration to their absolute physical limits. NASA required this extreme vetting to establish a known biological and psychological baseline. If a pilot's heart rate spiked or their judgment slipped while in orbit, mission control needed to know the cause was the harshness of the space environment rather than panic. This is the McDonnell aircraft Mercury capsule. Inside, the astronaut occupied a pressurized volume barely larger than a phone booth. Bolted to the narrow top was an escape tower. If the main rocket failed, rockets would ignite, ripping the capsule away from the explosion. Coming back down presented an equally violent physics problem. The capsule's blunt bottom created a massive shockwave that slowed its descent, while a fiberglass and resin ablative heat shield melted away layer by layer, carrying thousands of degrees of friction heat away from the cabin. Keeping the astronaut alive inside required mechanical lungs known as the environmental control system. This schematic shows how the system maintained a pure oxygen atmosphere at a low pressure of 5.5 psi. This specific design saved critical weight, while chemical beds scrubbed the exhaled carbon dioxide from the air before it could reach lethal toxicity levels. Before risking a human life, NASA tested these systems using animal precursor flights. In January 1961, a chimpanzee named Ham rode a suborbital trajectory. Ham had been trained through operant conditioning to pull levers in response to lights. During his flight, he executed these tasks correctly, despite experiencing microgravity and high G-forces. The data from these biological test flights provided the empirical proof NASA needed. The pressurized capsule worked, the environmental system sustained life, and a primate brain could function under the stress of launch. 4 months after Ham's flight, Alan Shepard boarded a Mercury Redstone rocket for the Freedom 7 mission. During the flight, Shepard manually manipulated the capsule's pitch, yaw, and roll. This proved that a human could maintain precise control over a spacecraft's attitude within a vacuum, demonstrating the role of an active pilot. Gus Grissom repeated this suborbital success 2 months later on Liberty Bell 7, confirming that Shepard's performance was not a fluke. However, Grissom's return to Earth nearly ended in disaster. After splashdown, the explosive hatch on Grissom's capsule detonated prematurely. Water flooded the cabin, sinking the spacecraft and forcing Grissom to swim for his life. It was a stark reminder of the immense hazards surrounding the final recovery phase. These suborbital hops demonstrated that a human could endure a 15-minute journey, but they lacked the velocity required for orbit, leaving the challenges of sustained weightlessness and high-speed re-entry unanswered. To reach orbital velocity, NASA transitioned to a modified Atlas missile, capable of producing the massive thrust required to push a capsule to 17,500 miles per hour. Riding that Atlas rocket, John Glenn completed 3 orbits of the Earth. His Friendship 7 mission showed that a human could function for nearly 5 hours in weightlessness, supported by a newly established global tracking and communications network. Subsequent flights pushed the parameters further. Carpenter and Shira proved astronauts could manage scientific experiments, override failing automatic systems, and carefully conserve limited resources. The absolute limit of the Mercury hardware was reached in May 1963. Gordon Cooper spent 34 hours inside the capsule, completing 22 orbits and manually firing his retro rockets when his automatic systems lost power. Reading this final mission summary report, the verdict is recorded in plain text. All 3 original objectives, orbiting a crewed spacecraft, investigating human performance, and safely recovering both the man and the ship, were successfully accomplished. Over the course of 5 years and 6 crewed flights, NASA gathered the medical data, tested the life support frameworks, and perfected the recovery protocols. Project Mercury replaced theoretical fears with the hard, empirical evidence needed to build the Gemini spacecraft and chart a course to the Moon.